This is Verneer for cardowners.com, and I'm going to be making a two-part series on winning without showdown at the lower limits. So the first part is going to be a session that I played at 25 NL, where I played the session without audio, and then I'm going to go back and record the audio on top of the video. And the second part is going to be a session at 50 NL. So you can get this software which makes this kind of graph by downloading Poker Tracker 3. So the first month I think is free, but if you don't already have it, then it's definitely a good idea. And what this does is you can have an option which graphs both your showdown winnings, your total winnings, and your non-showdown winnings. So one of the trends that I noticed in my own play is that a lot of my winnings came from showdown, and I was losing a lot without showdown. So I wanted to really focus on what are some situations where I can win more pots without showing down, or where I can just increase my non-showdown winnings. So as you can see in this session, the blue line represents pots that went to showdown, which wasn't a lot. And I was pretty break even at showdown. As you can see here, I got stacked, and here I stacked somebody. And other than that, it's just most of my variance came from non-showdown pots. And this is what this red line here represents, are pots that did not go to showdown. So at through about 160 hands, all my winnings were non-showdown winnings. And I dropped a little bit more, and then towards the end of the session, I came back up and finished up about a buy-in. So I played 4 tables and 280 hands. Now, a few things that I want to talk about are, first of all, the advantages of winning money without showdown. For one, it keeps people guessing about the kind of hands that you're playing. So if you're never showing down in hands, people will continue to just wonder more and more what kind of hand you're playing, and I think the curiosity eventually gets to them, and the requirements for looking you up become lighter and lighter. Sometimes people will look you up with ace high just because they have no idea what kind of hands you're playing, and they're just curious. And what happens with that is you're going to be able to get 2 or 3 streets of value out of your good hands. So you can comfortably bet your overpair 3 times, and if you think people are just calling you down light, then you're going to be able to get those 3 streets of value. And you're going to be able to get maybe 2 streets of value out of your more marginal hands. But we want to talk about what it takes to have a positive won money without showdown graph. For one, and I think this is the basis of any limit and any kind of winning poker, is good table and seed selection. So specifically, you want limited short stack. And I'm going to talk about situations or spots where I think having a short stack is okay. But with a lot of short stacks, a lot of hands are going to go to showdown because either they're going to push pre-flop or they're going to push post-flop. There's just not a lot of fold equity with short stacks, and that's kind of necessary if you're going to have a positive, or if you want your non-showdown winnings to be positive. Secondly, at the lower limits, good pre-flop hand selection is very, very important. At the upper limits, it's also pretty important, but not as important. But over here, you definitely want good hands to not get yourself in tricky situations. You also want to have a good understanding of situations to continuation bet, not continuation bet, and delay continuation bet. And I think this is one of the key concepts at 10 NL and 50 NL. I don't think people have a very good idea of good situations to continuation bet and good there's just different kinds of value in the different situations, and this could actually make for a whole video, because I just think it's such an important concept for the lower limit players to grasp, and I think it's the one that they don't have a good understanding of before moving up to 100 NL and 200 NL and higher. And you also want to double and triple barrel your strong hands. So some of your non-showdown winnings, a lot of your non-showdown winnings are not going to come from, these huge bluffs that you're going to be making. They're just going to come from you betting and betting and betting with good hands, and people sometimes people have to fold by the river. And that just develops this very aggressive image, which is going to get you paid off later on. And you also want to find selective spots to bluff in smaller pots. So it's actually bluffs that are kind of on the verge between small and medium, because I think a lot of people will call you if the pot is just very, very small. And if the pot gets huge, then a lot of people will usually call as well, because by the time the pot gets huge, they've got some kind of hand and they feel like they're pot committed. But I think it's this area between small and medium pots where bluffs are going to be most effective at the lower limits, because people are not going to be looking to contest those as much. And that could make for a whole other video too, but I'm just gonna touch up on that a little bit in this video. There's actually one spot where I think my bluff is a very bad bluff, and I'll talk about that later. But without further ado, let me start the tables and get to the hands. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is table selection. So I'm going to get on a bunch of tables, and I'm going to talk about what I like about them and what I don't like about them. So here I just open up this table and I'm looking at this seat. Now, the first thing that I notice is that every single player here is fully stacked. So I'm going to jump on the seat, because without having good reads on the players, this is just kind of my criteria, is I'm just going to go by stack sizes. And as I develop better reads, then I'm going to expand my criteria. But if we look at table 1, I've got a good stack on my left, and I have another good stack, 2 to my left, and I've got a full stack directly to my right. So this is a pretty good situation for me. I want those guys to be pretty fully stacked. Now, I have a short stack in the seat 2 to my right, which is not ideal. If I'm gonna have a short stack, I would prefer the short stack to be 3 to my left or 3 to my right, so directly opposite. But these two seats, it's acceptable. Now at the table 3, it's a pretty good situation where everybody's fully stacked, so we can go ahead. So I'm pretty sure I'm gonna jump up on this table, and yeah, so early on, if when I'm going to be tabling, I'm just kind of picking out seats, and this is acceptable. I've got the short stack that is directly opposite of me, and everybody else is fully stacked, so I'm happy with this table. So throughout the video, I'm going to be paying attention to tables which I think are profitable and tables which are I don't think are profitable. So for example, if there's a table that's filled with people playing 18-16, 15-12, it's just not going to be a profitable table for me, because unless I'm willing to play small ball poker, I can just afford to pick better tables, pick tables that are a little bit looser. All right, so I am going to move forward a little bit. All right, so over here, there's a raise from the short stack. Now, if it was just the short stack that raised, I would probably fold my deuces, because I don't want to be gambling with a short stack. I think I can find much better situations to put my money in. But when I've got a player that's fully stacked overcalling, and it's only 40 more cents to me, and there's a good chance that by me calling, this T to 92 is going to call as well, and then I've got deuces in a multi-way pot, it's going to be a profitable situation for me. So I am going to call there. And basically hope to hit a set. And if I don't, then I'm just going to get out of there. So this is a very bad flop texture and flop for me in general. So I'm just going to check fold. It's very connected, and it's got 3 over cards, and basically I just can't hope for anything. With deuces there, I'm just looking to hit a set. So especially after he bets, it's just not a good situation for me. So without a read, this is going to be an open for me on the button. And down here, I just choose to fold my ace rag. I think in a multi-way pot, if it was suited, I would certainly call. I would never raise it there, but I think ace to rag is just going to get me into trouble. And it plays very poorly post flop unless I hit trips, a straight, or some kind of two pair. So with my pocket fives up here, I can certainly isolate both those two players. Now, if I'm going to be doing that, I think any hand that I'm isolating this weaker player with, I have to consider getting it in. And I think fives are certainly ahead of his range. And I could isolate, but I um, I do choose to limp here to encourage both of these two other players to limp and basically try to win a bigger pot if I do hit a set. I think both lines are acceptable. So by me limping, it encourages the small blind to come along and basically just play a multi-way pot. Now, up here on this table 3, we talked about situations where there are good spots to continuation bet, delay continuation bet, and not continuation bet. So I raise 9-8 on the button, and the flop comes 8 ace jack with a flush draw and multiple straight draws out there, including 2 overcards to my bottom pair. I think this is a great situation to not continuation bet, but perhaps delay continuation bet on the turn, where I think on the turn he'll call with a lot of draws, and I'm going to be able to basically bet there, charge draws, and then check down the river in position. But if I continuation bet here, I just think I'm going to be getting called a lot, and then on the turn, pretty much no turn card is going to be a good card for me. So the 6 is a good card. If he checks, I am going to delay continuation bet here because I think that I'm going to be able to. There's a lot of draws that will just call here, and then I'm going to be able to check down the river. So he could have a jack. He probably doesn't have an ace, and he probably doesn't have a flush, but I think that line is an optimal line against an unknown in this situation. So there's really no value in betting the river, as I think any ace, any jack, or any flush is going to call me. Now, some people definitely could take the very tricky line of check calling or checking a flush draw, check calling the flush once they've made it. And once the river pairs, they're going to either check raise or check call because they're afraid of the paired ace. So I don't think there's any value betting the river, but there's definitely value betting the turn as it encourages a lot of draws to come along. So my hand's a very vulnerable hand. All right. So on table 4, we've got a short stack that raises to 4 BBs, and I've got ace 9. So I think ace 9 plays very poorly against his erasing range. I think if we get it in, I'm never in good shape. The best I'm hoping for is him to have some kind of Broadway cards, which don't include an ace. So if he just had maybe like $2, then I might gamble it up and say I'm ahead of his range. But I'm just gonna fold on the button and not worry about that hand. So the other thing to consider is with a hand like ace 7 here, when I'm going to be raising, it's I think it's pretty important to not think about necessarily the kind of hand that you're raising here. Like, while that is important, I think it's much more important to think about the situation that you're in. So in this case, I have ace-7 suited in the cutoff, and I've got a pretty tight player behind me. Well, after 3 hands, they haven't played a hand yet, so I guess I don't know anything about them. But in the small blind, I've got a player who's playing 67-33. So they've played 2 out of their first 3 hands. And then I've got a short stack on in I've got a short stack in the big blind. Now they've got about 30 big blinds, and they're in a situation where I think they're going to be shoving a lot over. Well, not necessarily. They've got $8, but I think they're going to be calling a lot, and they're going to be shoving a lot of flops. So against this kind of short stack, my ace-7 suited, again, I don't think it fares that well against their range. So uh, especially with this player already being involved in 2 pots, it might be one of those situations where I raise, they call, and then the short stack shoves. And then what do I do with my ace-7? Like, I can gamble it up and try to isolate, but it's just a situation that I don't have to be involved in. So I'd rather just avoid it. I think there's much better situations to get my money in. And I think at 25 and L, you can pick your spots a lot more. You don't have to gamble a lot of marginal situations. So I think that's one mentality, um, or one concept to be really thinking about as you're moving up in stakes is not necessarily, what hand do I open from what position, but what are the circumstances at this table, and uh, how do I capitalize on those? So if you have like a really tight player playing in a big blind and you're in the small blind, then it's going to be profitable for you to be raising any 2 cards, pretty much. And some hands are automatic opens from any position. Um, so here up on table 2, I choose to cold call, 9-8 suited in position. It's something that I've been experimenting with and playing post flop. So this is a good flop for me. It's a way ahead, way behind situation, but once he checks, then I'm going to fire a continuation bet and take it down. Once he checks pretty quickly, I don't think he has much of a hand. I think if he would have bet, I would have called and evaluated the turn. With a hand like 9-8 suited there with top pair, not a very good kicker. I am looking just to go to showdown to that unless I improve. There's a lot of cards that will come on the turn that will slow the action down, but I'm not really looking to bluff that hand. I'm just trying to get it to showdown. So here I have up on table 3, I have Queen 8 offsuit in the small blind. Sometimes I would raise it blind on blind, depending on what happens. But against somebody who's playing 71-43, I'm not looking to get involved with Queen 8, even though it's ahead of his range. I just think it's not going to be a profitable situation for me. So, especially with the person on the button raising, I'm just looking to pitch it. And the person on the button is playing 57-14, so they're not a very good candidate to be 3-betting in general. I guess that's my other option, is whether I want to be 3-betting. I don't really think you have to. I don't think you have to 3-bet light at 25 NL. I mean, there's definitely situations where you can do it, but I think people don't have are not able to fold that well. They do want to go to showdown, so you pretty much want to have good hands when you go to showdown. So I've been playing some of the lower stakes to kind of see the differences between 25 NL, 50 NL, 100 NL, and 200 NL. And that's one of the things I noticed is that once you get up to at 200 NL, there's a lot of 3-betting and 4-betting pre-flop. and there's a lot of hands that just you end up going all in pre-flop, and people will show up with nines, people will show up with eights. Ace queen is pretty standard. Ace king is like, nobody folds ace king pre-flop. Um, I mean, some people do, but I'm saying it just seems like ace king is going to be the nuts at 200 NL. Now, at 100 NL, there's still a lot of three betting, um, but people are, for the most part, people are able to fold a little bit more. Um, Now at 50 NL, I played there the other day. I didn't see much three betting and not much three betting light, but people would just they would call a lot. So there's a lot more level one thinkers where people are calling, calling, calling. Um, and in situations like that, you're going to be able to get a lot of value out of your good hands, but you got to have some good hands. Um, all right, so here this player is playing 11-11 at this point, so those are pretty tight stats. Out of 9 hands, it means they've only played one, so they're three betting me. Um, I am going to choose to four bet them here because I want them, if they have a hand like jacks or queens or ace king, to get a lot of money in pre-flop, and um, I think if they have something like ace king, then I do want to give an opportunity to put the money in pre-flop. If they have a hand like queens or jacks or even tens, then there's a lot of overcards that can come that are going to kill the action. So against a tight player like this, or a player that I perceive to be a tight player, I'm going to pump it up and hope that they shove. Now in this case, they just choose to call. It's a great flop for me. Jacks and queens are not going anywhere. Ace king is probably done, but I'm going to bet kind of a smaller amount. I'm going to bet 7 into 12 and hope that they perceive that as weakness and shove. But they choose not to, and um, I take it down. So I think four betting there early on against somebody that I perceive to be tight um, is good because it does give them that chance to shove if they like their hand, and it builds the pot. Against the player, once I get a better read, sometimes I'll flat call there. Um, Sometimes, yeah. So that's what I'll do. Um, I get three bet here pretty quickly right off the bat, and I get cold called by this player who's playing 20-10 over 10 hands. So um, I'm not sure what he's three betting me here with, but the cold call of the three bet, usually from a player that's playing 20-10, is like nines, tens, jacks, or queens that they're just not sure what to do with. Usually nines, tens, and jacks. Possibly ace king, sometimes ace queen suited. So I'm getting pretty good odds. Usually I would fold this, but in this case I choose to see a flop, and I'm going to proceed with caution. So I'll flop a gutter, but um, I don't think there's much value in betting. So especially, I think this guy has to be concerned about what this person has. So it's a good spot for him to bet once, um, because it's king high and it's gonna get queens and jacks and nines to fold and something like ace queen suited. So it's definitely a good bet for him to or a good spot for him to bet if he has a hand, or if he doesn't have a hand too. It's just a good flop to bet. But once this person overcalls, I'm not going to proceed with my gutter because I think this guy obviously has to have a hand to play it the way he did. So the turn brings another king, and it goes check check, which makes me think that this person does not have a hand like ace king. He might have queens, he might have jacks, he might have aces and just be afraid of the king, or he might have total garbage. So now 633 CSI bets $10 in this situation, which makes me think that he either has a king or something like pocket tens and chose to slow play them. I don't think he has aces. I don't think he has queens. I think this is a he's making a value bet here, and Daniel King calls pretty quickly and runs an ace king. I don't like this call, um, unless he had something like, well, in this case he had Jack 10, so he three bet me pretty light, and that's something that I'm going to keep in mind when I play, and then called pretty quickly with the second pair, pretty much no kicker. So my initial read when I saw him being 11-11, now I think that he's a lot more of a fishy player. All right, up on table four, I had I just checked Queen Jack in the small blind, as I don't think it's a hand that I want to be raising with the short stack limping. And I checked the flop because I was way ahead, way behind. I could certainly bet the flop, but I just chose to check it. I thought there would be more value in it. Once the turn comes and the small blind checks, I've got top two, and now I'm going to choose to lead out, and I'm going to take the pot down. So far on table three, I he has yet this person Daniel King has yet to see my hand, and I kind of have a better idea of how he plays after that um, Jack 10 hand got showed down. All right, now I've got a much stronger hand. I have an ace queen suited on table four in the small blind, and I'm gonna pump it up. And this is a hand that I'm definitely gonna go all in against Razy Daisy, and that's something that I'm gonna consider when I am making that raise. I'm gonna make it 6 BBs because um, because I'm gonna be out of position. I want to punish the people out of position. I'm gonna punish the people that are gonna have position on me. So both players call, and the flop is 4-7-9 with two hearts. It's very connected and misses me completely. And I think it's a bad situation for me to continuation bet into two people. So Razy Daisy has a little bit more than a pot size bet left, and pretty much I'm never ahead here. Um, so I'm gonna choose to check it down. Up here I call with pocket twos, and this is a flop that I'm just gonna be check folding, as I think um, it's a little bit too connected and hits his range a little bit too much. So even though he only bets 50 cents, um, I I'm just gonna play my hand for what it's worth in a multi-way pot in this situation. So with a pretty tight player in the small blind, I'm gonna raise 7-9 offsuit. I've got a pretty loose player in the big blind, which makes me makes me a little bit more worried about raising this hand. But I think with the tight small blind player, it's a hand that I'm going to be raising. All right, so he donk leads into me for $1, and he's a pretty tight player, which makes me think that he has some kind of maybe smaller pocket pair, or like he could have some like eights or nines here that he called pre-flop, and now he doesn't want to let go, or he could have a flush draw. But I have trip sevens, and I think he's going to be bet calling a lot of hands here. So I want to build a pot against um, kind of smaller pocket pairs, and I want to develop an aggressive image, and I want to get value out of draws. So this is a auto race for me against the net almost always. And he thinks for a while. And think he ends up folding. So here I'm raising these pocket fives, and this is the hand that I will get it all in against Crazy Daisy pre-flop. He's starting to have just enough of a stack for me to be a little bit more cautious against him. But on a king high board, I am in a continuation bet because I do expect to take it down often enough. If he calls here, I'm just going to give it up. But I think he's playing way too many hands, and it's going to be profitable for me to c-bet that flop. All right, up on table one, I well, let me see how the action went up on table one. So I raised in early position with 9-10 suited and got called, and now I'm being donk led by this player playing 60-30. So there's a lot of draws out there, and I've got top pair, and I think I'm not gonna like any kind of turn card, so I'm going to raise him here to get value out of draws and potentially get some kind of fold equity. Here with pocket kings, I'm definitely gonna get it all in against Crazy Daisy, but he chooses to fold. So I make it $1.75, and he folds pretty quickly. And this is going to factor into my later decisions where I'm gonna try to pull a bluff on him, and it's not gonna be very successful. I get kings again on Pengola, and I get two callers and a flop that once again I'm gonna be happy getting all my money in on. There's a flush draw. It's jack high. At this point, I choose to check it because I think Crazy Daisy earlier, when I checked, he bet. So I think that if I show weakness here, then he's going to be betting, and JSO is going to be calling with a pretty wide range, and then I can come over the top and kind of trap both of them. I actually think this line is going to get more value out of this situation. I think if they were both fully stacked, then I would probably lead into the field. But I feel like I'm so far ahead here, and I think Crazy Daisy is going to be betting a lot that I think checking is going to maximize my expectation. So here I raise. Actually, no, this guy raises. I cold call with force and flop a set. He bets, and it's a board that I'm not really afraid of anything. Yeah, there's a straight draw out there, but it's a situation where I'm so far ahead, I don't mind peeling a card, and I'm just gonna cold call my force. So by cold calling here, I could also represent a hand like Ace Jack or Ace Queen, where I think I'm going to be able to get more value out of some of his other hands. By raising here and playing very aggressively, I'm pretty much representing Queen Jack or Pocket Fours, or maybe a hand like King 10, which is just playing that draw aggressively. But it's dry enough of a board to where I think cold calling's fine. All right, so on the turn, JSO leads into the field, and again, I'm hoping that by calling Crazy Daisy will do something like shove. So I choose to call again, and I think I definitely think I've got the best hand, so I'm still kind of slow playing. And on the river, once again, I'm pretty sure I've got the best hand. So now I'm just gonna try to value bet an amount that I think he might call with a jack. So I bet 525 into the $7 or so, and he thinks for a while and he folds. All right. On the turn with my pocket fours, the 3 is a great card for me. So now I just want to get a little bit of value, and he folds pretty quickly. So does not look like there's much value to be had there. All right, here's kind of an interesting hand where I repop pocket queens to somebody who's playing 44-0 with an aggression factor of 0.5. And he calls pretty quickly, which makes me think that he does not have much of a hand. I think if he had kings or aces or ace king, he would think about it a little bit more. And I think if he had something like pocket jacks, he might call quickly with pocket jacks. But now I bet 475, and he insta min raises me. Now that makes me think that he has. I'm actually not really sure how to think about it. Um, he could have definitely slow played pocket aces pre-flop and cold called really quickly, and before the flop even comes out, made his decision. And another thing that kind of worries me is that he's got a really low aggression factor. His aggression factor is 0.5. So he's not very aggressive, and he insta acted. But I think there's a lot of draws out there, and he could have a hand like Ace Jack, which he might consider to be the nuts. He might have a flush draw, which he considers to be the nuts. I don't have the Queen of Diamonds, so that makes my hand a little bit less strong. But I think, especially at the lower limits, when it's a re-raised pot against an unknown, I'm just gonna get the money in. He calls pretty quickly, which worries me, and flopped a set on me. So I think set versus an overpair is mostly going for 100 BBs. That's just mostly variance, and um, not much you can do about that. I don't think the focus of play should be, you know, making those big folds in that situation. People say, well, you know, like he has to have a set there, he has to have aces there. Well, I, I've seen so many goofy situations where people will show up with Jack 10 there and play it the same way. So, all right. So I pick up Ace Queen pretty soon afterwards, and our friend that three bet us earlier with Jack 10 is three betting or squeezing in this situation, and I've got a cold caller that's playing 52-14, and I don't think he's very strong here. So I think my greatest chance of fold equity and value is just gonna come from shoving this ace queen. I think I'm way ahead of Daniel King's range, and there's a lot of dead money in the pot, and I don't want to like four bet and give him any kind of chance to like try to five bet bluff me. He snap calls, which makes me kind of worried until the ace hits on the flop, and I'm already thinking to myself, ship it now. With the king coming, I was thinking we would chop, but he had pocket tens, and I think my decision to, in fact, I know that my decision to ship it in was based on this Jack 10 hand that we played earlier, along with the pocket kings. So he likes to three bet, and he likes to three bet light. So ace queen against this kind of a player in this kind of a situation is going to be the nuts. Here, up on table 4, I've got, let me move forward a little bit. I pick up, yeah, 10-6 suited, which sometimes I would raise, but with Raisy Daisy only having 540, I'm going to be folding. So that's one of the kind of more annoying spots about having a short stack in this position, that it's going to restrict the hands that I'm opening from the cutoff. So, but it would be even worse if he was in the big blind, because it would restrict the hands that I have from the button. All right, so in a limped pot, I flop top 2 and am insta min raised by this Jepson fella. Actually, I don't flop top 2. I flop top and bottom. So there's a lot of draws out there. He could have a lot of aces. He could have a lot of kings. So and I'm going to be out of position. So I'm going to take the aggression to him, and I'm going to bet, 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 bet. So I make it 525, and he calls pretty quickly, which makes me think that he's got some kind of either flush draw or marginal ace. And I choose to bet 725 and a 10. It's kind of a bigger bet because I think that he'll call me with a lot of draws, and the turn is when I'm going to get value out of those draws. And he'll also call me with a lot of aces. And at this point, I'm very comfortable getting all the money in. But he calls really quickly again. The river doesn't change anything. He has $13 left, and there's $25 in the pot. At this point, I don't think he's going to fold any kind of an ace, and I think he's going to fold a flush draw. But I think with all the money in there, it's a lot more likely that he's got some kind of ace or king than a flush draw. So I'm going to choose to ship it in here, and he folds right off the bat. So the advantage of shoving the river there is usually that money's going to go to my win without showdown. And if I check and he checks behind, basically I'm just hoping he has some kind of a flush draw and chooses to bluff it. But I think there's a lot more value in shoving that river. And by being aggressive there, like I said, it increases that one without showdown. All right, here a player posts out of position and min raises. So Queen 10 suited plays very well in position against the situation. So I'm going to re-raise and expect to take it down often enough. And if I don't, I'm going to be able to bet enough flops or turns to make it profitable. So he limps again. Queen 10 is going to play well when isolating this kind of a limper. I think high Broadway cards and medium and high pocket pairs play very well in those situations. I think kind of higher suited connectors play okay. So for the sake of the video, there are I'm just going to go over some of the hands specifically that I played, and I'm going to kind of fast forward through some of the more monotonous stuff. So I choose to open 9-10 on the button. I've got a pretty loose player in the big blind and a short stack in the small blind, but I think it's still going to be a profitable open. Now the small blind calls, and this guy he's a pretty passive guy. And I think the flop is one of those way ahead, way behind time situations where I could certainly bet, but I don't think I'm going to get a couple of streets of value. So I think that I am going to get more value out of checking the flop and going for a delay continuation bet. There's a lot of cards that can come that could definitely kill my action, but I still think that a delay continuation bet against this type of player is going to be more profitable. The 2's a great card on the turn, which doesn't really change anything, but if he does have some kind of puts up an additional some additional straight draws out there. So now I'm just going to bet to get both value out of my my hand and potentially draws that he might have, and to be able to check it down on the river and showdown. Now the 8 doesn't change anything. He'll never fold an ace. He probably won't fold a 9. I have some showdown value, so now I'm just gonna check. If I miss this flop completely, I would bet it to try to bluff it almost always. But with some showdown value, I don't mind showing it down. All right, now I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. I'm gonna fast forward to this ace king hand up on table 2, where I pick up ace king and I have a 67-33 player who is playing a pretty full stack, and he min raises the button. So at this point I decide to pop him up quite a bit, mostly because I don't want to be playing ace king out of position. I think if I had aces or kings I would do the same. Basically it's a hand that I'm looking to play very aggressively. And because I'm going to be in position, I would rather charge him for having position on me there. All right, so the next hand comes up on table one, where I pick up King 8 offsuit and the cutoff. Now, a lot of my decisions are going to be based on who is to still act behind me and who acted before me, much more so than my actual hand. So here, this hand's a pretty garbage hand, and folding it is certainly good. But when I've got somebody who's playing 10-6 on the button, and both players in the blinds, actually, I think this guy's stats are about to change. But so this guy's playing 20-20 in. Oh, here we go. So at the time that I was looking at the hand, he was playing 17-17, and the small blind's playing 16-13. So I expect both of those players to be playing very tight out of position, and the button's going to be playing, well, the button over 31 hands is playing incredibly nitty. These are like, nitty full ring stats. I think this is going to be a profitable open where it's going to increase my VPIP and make it seem like I'm a more active player. And they're just not going to they're not going to call me without a hand. Now, in this case, I get re-raised by the small blind after he thinks for a bit and end up pitching the hand pretty quickly. But I think given the situation with the tight button and both blinds being pretty tight, I think opening this hand, I don't think it's going to be a big mistake. And in fact, I do think it's going to be profitable. All right, so we pick up the action a little bit later, where I have 6-7 suited in the cutoff, and there's a player that's playing pretty loose over here. He's playing 40% and doesn't have a full stack, and there's a big blind who this Razy Daisy guy has about a half stack. So I'm dealing with two pretty short stacks, as well as a very aggressive player in the small blind. So if I raise here, very often I could get re-raised by the player in the small blind, and Razy Daisy could also shove on me as well. Although he hasn't shown that he's the kind of short stacker that's shoving a lot. He just likes to be involved in a lot of pots. So I think raising here to isolate would not be good, because I think Razy Daisy is going to come along, and then Zoku's is going to come along as well, and that's just going to create a multi-way pot. And I don't think 6-7 in position at this limit is strong enough to play a multi-way pot. But I do want to see a flop, so I do choose to limp because I expect to be in position. Now, Yukana makes it $1, and both players fold. But now I'm in a situation where we're kind of deep. We're both 120 big blinds deep, and I've got a hand which plays great post flop, and it only cost me 75 cents to play it. So I am going to play it, especially given how loose and aggressive this player is. So the flop gives me a open-ended straight draw, and the guy checks right off the bat. So I'm not really sure what to make of his check, but it's a flop that should hit my range, and I'm thinking he's got some kind of overcards. Now the turn completes the straight for me and puts out a flush draw on the board. So now he thinks, and there's 620 in the pot, and he bets $3. So now I think that he's got some kind of overcards with maybe like a flush card, like an ace queen with the queen of diamonds, or an ace jack with a jack of diamonds, something like that. Maybe like king queen with a one diamond. So it's a very, very draw heavy board, and I think this is a mandatory raise. And I'm more than happy to get it in. If he has a flush here, then he played his hand pretty well, but um, or I guess if he had, I would expect him to bet the flop with some kind of high cards and a flush draw. So I can't really put him on a flush. If he chose to re-raise pre-flop with some kind of broad weight flush cards and then check call when he hit a flush draw, then he's one up on me. But I choose to make it a little bit more than 3x with the intention of getting it in on any kind of non-diamond river. So his bet there to me, um, like I said, screams Broadway cards with a diamond. So he thinks and he thinks. And he thinks some more. I guess he's trying to figure out if he's going to get the right odds to play here. But he does end up folding. So I think betting the flop where I flopped open in straight draw, and I felt like betting the flop basically, I felt like I had some fold equity. So sometimes I'll check it behind, but once he insta checks, I felt that I had enough fold equity to justify that play. And then I think the turn is a mandatory lead. I mean a mandatory raise. So we also have two hands going on simultaneously up on these tables, table 1 and table 3. So 8-6 is a pretty standard button open. Now here I choose to set mine with my pocket 5s against this guy. We're both a little bit deeper, and I feel like he's going to stack off very light to me. So I'm more than happy to set mine, and once I miss, I'm more than happy to just let him have it and play a small pot. Here the guy posts out of position. King Jack in the cutoff is going to be a pretty standard isolation play for me. And even though I've checked 2 streets and shown weakness, I'm just still going to fold my pocket 5s. I don't think they have much value there. So I'm isolating the guy with King Jack, and he folds after repop, after posting out of position. All right, we're going to pick up the action down here on table 4. Raisy Daisy limps under the gun. Now Jack 7 suited is going to play pretty well post flop, especially if I isolate the limper. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to make it repop it or pop him up to $1 and try to take it away on a lot of flops. So he calls, and the flop comes ace high, ace 3-5. There's a straight out there, and definitely a straight draw out there, but it's ace high, and it's gonna be a good spot for me to bet. He calls pretty quickly. Now the turn gives me a gut shot straight draw, but it also puts 4 to a straight out there. I don't think this is going to be a good spot for me to barrel again, because I think once he calls the flop, he probably has some kind of pair and gutter, but most likely he has an ace, and he's probably not going to fold an ace. So once he calls on that flop, this kind of a player, I'm just going to give it up. And basically, I think he outflopped me in this situation, and I think double barreling and triple barreling, this kind of player would be very spewy. Okay, we pick up the action on table 3, where I have to get pocket 8s in on the button. It's a hand that I'm definitely going to be going all in against the short stack. And this Daniel guy has been calling a lot. He's playing 35-26 very aggressively. I flop 1 over card, but in this case, I am going to bet, because I expect to get called by both a 5 and a 4 and a lot of draws and just take it down. Now, if you kind of notice the table conditions, this guy's sitting out. I've got a nit to my right, a pretty tight player 2 to my right, a short stack directly to my left, and a very loose player 2 to my left. So this table is not looking that good anymore, and I'm gonna leave it and try to look for another table. All right, so up here on table 2, I raise ace queen under the gun, or in this case, it's effectively under the gun +1. and I'm called by the big blind. The flop it's pretty connected, but I'm still gonna take a shot at it because I expect a lot of draws to call me. So I expect him to call me with worse. I expect him to call me with some kind of like random 5 or 6, or like some kind of a 7, maybe like an ace 7. Um, the turn brings 4 to a straight, and at this point, I don't want to invest any more money in the pot. And the river brings the king, and he checks pretty quickly. And I actually, in retrospect, really hate my bet here because I just don't think he's gonna fold anything. And effectively, I'm repping like exclusively a king when I bet here, and so I bet, and he raises me, and there's nothing I can do other than fold. But I just don't like my bet. I don't expect him to fold a 7. I don't expect him to fold a 6, never, of course. And I just thought he would lead the river with a 6. So his check on the river kind of deceived me. But it's one of those hands that in retrospect, like I said, I just don't like. He's been limping a lot, so I pop him up with pocket 4s and take it down pre-flop. So we pick up the action a little bit later. I am about to pick up pocket jacks down here, I think. So this is a pretty interesting hand up here on table 2, where it's a standard situation where you've got jacks in the cutoff, and you're 3-bet by the big blind or by the button. So you're going to be playing out of position. Now, the player's playing very, very loose and very, very aggressive. But over 57 hands, if you look at this statistic over here, the 3-bet, he's yet to 3-bet anybody. So normally this would be a situation where I would 4-bet and probably look to get it in if somebody whose stats are 28, 23 is playing this way. But because he has never 3-bet, I choose to go the more conservative route and just choose to call. I'm not calling for set value. I'm calling to evaluate on the flop. Now, the flop is 9-6-8, and I think it's one of those way ahead, way behind time situations. I think that if he has some kind of ace king, ace queen, or ace jack, he's going to he basically has 6 outs against me. I think raising here essentially is like a bluff. Like, I'm ahead of 10s, and I don't think queens, kings, or aces are ever going to fold. So here I'm just going to peel a card. And I do have the jack of hearts, which gives me some additional straight flush draw outs. So I do choose just to call it. And the turn brings the ace of hearts, which is a pretty bad card for me, in that a lot of aces are in his range. And now he bets 725 into 16, and I just think that investing any more money in there would pocket me by the river, and I just choose to fold my hand. So I think if it was against a more aggressive opponent, I might check raise this flop all in. Sometimes I would get it all in pre-flop, but I felt taking the more conservative route against this player was going to be my best option for this situation. Now up here, we kind of pick it up later, where I river to flush and chose to kind of overbet it. But what I wanted to point out is on table 4, now we're in a situation where I've got a player who's playing 2-0, which is kind of crazy. I guess they're waiting for aces and kings on table 4. So I've got this player on my left, and then I've got a short stack on my right, and then I've got a pretty nitty player sitting 2 to my right. So at any table, you've got to answer the question, where's the money going to come from? And I just don't see, I have no idea where my money's going to come from at this table. Like, I could steal a lot of blinds, but that's not the kind of poker that I want to be playing, where I'm just basically stealing a lot of blinds and not getting any post flop play. So I choose to finish up this table, and I'm gonna try to find a better table, a better spot to get my money in. So up on table two, I've got a the player that's playing 43-10 is he limps. Now king six suited on the button is actually not going to play that poorly post flop, and it's a hand that I am going to be isolating with. So we've got this short stack who calls, and the flop is pretty connected, but I am going to take a shot at it. So I have very little showdown value, and if I'm going to be able to take it down on the flop, I'm going to be happy with it. I think if I had any kind of showdown value, I might choose to go for some pot control, but with king high, if I can take it down on the flop with these stack sizes, why not? That's what I'm going to try to do. So up on table three, I pick up Jack 10 suited in the big blind. Now the player on the button, who's playing pretty loose but not very aggressive, raises me, and I could certainly re-raise, but I think a hand like Jack 10 suited does have quite a bit of value, and I'm going to be looking to play a lot of flops. So for example, on this flop, my intention is to check raise. Um, he checks pretty quickly, and the turn comes a 9. So, all these hands, all these cards really hit my range. Um, and, if he doesn't bet this, then it makes me think he's got some kind of high cards, maybe an ace. So I'm going to lead this and expect to take it down often enough. And he thinks for a while and folds. But if you're going to be calling with hands like 10 jack suited in the big blind, you've got to be willing to make moves on kind of low flops or medium flops or when you hit any kind of draw. The reason I choose to call there with 10 jack suited is because, like I said, I think it's going to play pretty well post flop versus his raising range. I think he's going to be raising a lot of hands like 9-8, 10-8, 10-7, hands that I am going to have dominated. And he's also going to be raising a lot of dominating draws. So that's my intention with that hand. But like I said, you've got to be willing to make some moves on kind of low and medium flops, and to make it a profitable call. All right, we once again fast forward a little bit, and we get a limper and a min raise. So the min raise is from a 37-5 player, and the limper is from a short stack. So at this point, I've got jacks, which are a premium hand, and I am going to repop it. The short stack insta calls, and the flop is 2 aces and a 9 with a flush draw out there. So the short stack checks, and the player checks. Now, I think that I am going to have a lot of fold equity here. And I'm also not afraid to get it in with the short stack. So basically, what I'm going to do is, with all the draws out there, I'm going to bet an amount which is going to commit me against the short stack and could very well represent the ace. So I bet 250 into like $6, where I think the short stack will shove with all kinds of garbage, including a 9, including like pocket eights, including a flush draw. And I think once he shoves, I think this player, this day 1009, is going to play very honestly. So I think he'll fold pretty much anything that's not an ace. Um, so I'm going to find out kind of exactly where I am. And once he re-raises all in, my jacks are no good. And I see that this guy had pocket twos and Day had ace king. So just kind of used a cheap bet to find out where I am and get the most value out of something like this guy said. He had pocket twos, so if I isolate him, I'm more than happy with that. So I open ace-2 effectively from the cutoff, ace-2 suited, because we're four-handed. And the flop gives me, it's pretty connected. But I do have a gutter, and I do choose to bet it. The turn gives me some showdown value with my with a pair, and the river brings a 10. Now he thinks for a while and bets like 225 into like four something, and I just don't think it's a very strong bet. I think he might have something like maybe like pocket sixes or like a five, or maybe even a missed flush draw. But I just don't perceive that as a very strong bet. So in this case, I decide to kind of go and feel and pop him up to 850, and he folds pretty quickly. So not exactly sure what he had, but like I said, I just felt that he was weak there and I chose to raise him. Um, Now the very next hand, I pick up pocket tens against a player who's playing 14-14, and I choose to flat call. So I think that this is a situation where he could have, if I repop him pre-flop, he's gonna fold a lot of hands that I'm ahead of, that I could be ahead of on the flop, but he'll call me with a lot of hands that are gonna crush me. So basically, I feel like these tens versus this player are going to have a lot more value if I flat call. And the flop is pretty drawy, and he bets $1.50, and I actually choose to check raise him. So I would be check raising with a pretty wide range here. I think if he was to um, re-raise me on that flop, I know my tens are beat. But I think he'll call with a nine. I think he'll call with a draw. And this is kind of the reason why I chose to flat call those tens pre-flop, is that he could be in with a lot of worse hands here. All right, so the turn brings a two, which doesn't really change anything unless he has like a 5-6. Um, and I choose to kind of put out a small blocker bet, like 475. Now, one of the things about the lower limits is that people will play a little bit more honestly, while at the higher limits, people could see right through the blocker bet as being exactly that. Um, and they might choose to bluff raise me here. I think at the lower limits, people will play a little bit more honestly. And the river brings a 7, which again doesn't change anything. And I could choose to check it, but since we're on the theme of trying to win without showdown, I think there's a little bit of value there. And if he folds, then he'll forever wonder what I had. So I bet 725 into 1960 and take the pot down. All right, and this is going to be the last hand that I'm going to play, where I pick up ace-8 in the small blind. And my main reason for raising it here is this guy's playing 4-4, so he's just like not playing any hands. So I think raising any kind of cards against him is going to be profitable. On the flop, because he's so tied pre-flop, I just don't think there's much value in betting. I just don't think he'll call me with worse. So I choose to check and hope that he catches up a little bit on the turn and underrepresented my hand. And the turn goes, I bet and he calls. And I would bet like half the pot and try to get a little bit of value on the river. And it ends up that we had the exact same hand. So I just don't think there's much value in betting the flop there. And I think the turn and the river, once I check the flop, are pretty clear value bets. So against two nits, raising 8 queen. I guess 17-17 is not too nitty, but it's pretty tight. So that's for the most part of the video. I finish up the tables. Start getting off the tables pretty soon here. Oh, I see. There's a comment here from Johnny 1720 saying, "What am I doing at 25 NL?" Well, I'm making a video, Johnny. And you're in it. So I wonder how you did. All right, so once again, this is Vernier for Card Runners.